Hello, everybody. How are you doing tonight? How are you doing tonight? All right. I'm filling in for Nikki, who can't be here tonight. In fact, we have one teacher and one guest, so we'll have more time for your questions, I hope. But I'd like to do a couple things before I introduce Ann Cooper, and one is to talk about what happened last week and what was, to me, extremely frustrating and in some ways interesting experience. But before I go any further, just so we can check in with our clickers, get out your clickers and answer A, if you think it was really weird last week, and B, if you did not. While we're tallying that, a couple quick announcements. People have handed me some interesting events that, if you're following these issues, you might want to know about. There is a World Food Day rally on Sunday, October 16th. That's going to be in 7th Street, Mission and 7th. And it's about the right to know about genetically modified foods. There's a movement, a very large petition drive, pushing this issue of labeling GMOs. Don't confuse World Food Day with Plain Food Day, which is on the 24th of October, and there'll be events on campus, including a picnic with Michelle Simon, who's a terrific food studies person and activist. So look for information about that. Also, on October 18th, at the Goldman School of Public Policy, room 150, there's an evening with Marie-Monique Robin, who is a very good journalist and filmmaker who did a very important movie called The World According to Monsanto. She's got a new, shocking documentary by her own account, Our Daily Poison. And it's about pesticides and chemicals in our environment. And Raj Patel asked me to spread the word on that. It'll be a benefit for Food First, but it's free. So I don't know how that works exactly. Bring some money. Now, I want to just talk a little bit about last week. And let me see if I can find a microphone to do it with. Here we go. I didn't feel like our guests really engaged with our questions at any kind of serious level. And that may be an understatement. And I was surprised how quickly that Mr. Sinclair in particular kind of retreated to talking points and kind of standard issue corporate language. That is interesting in and of itself, I think. By the way, how many people thought it was really weird? 75%. Okay. You don't have to raise your hands. We have clickers. That sounds about right. I thought it was pretty weird. So why? Why did it unfold this way? Well, one reason was we didn't have enough time. Having that 90-minute, hard out meant that it was easy to filibuster. And people do this all the time. And the PowerPoints themselves, which were long, one of them I wasn't even prepared for. Jib was not originally going to do a PowerPoint, and that kind of took me by surprise. And it was interesting, but it was about elephants. And so it wasn't entirely germane. And I don't know if this was their intention, but it meant that there were only about, I don't know, a half hour for conversation or 25 minutes for conversation. So we didn't get to drill down as we might have. Then there was the fact that we were recording. All these classes have been recorded, have been live streamed, and have been put up on YouTube. And they knew that. And as it turned out, that had a very unfortunate effect on Jack's willingness to speak more freely. And he told me this afterwards. He said, this would have been a different discussion if you weren't recording. I wish he had told me before, because we didn't have to record. I would have been happy to say this one's not going to be on YouTube if it would have afforded a more frank exchange of views. So that's another factor. And I wish I'd known about that. There's a lesson in that. The other thing, though, you should know, and by the way, your questions were superb. I thought you managed to thread the needle of being very tough and pointed and entirely polite. And you asked really good questions. However, they weren't always good questions for our guests. In other words, Jack doesn't own the company. He's not the president of the company. So when we see him, we see a representative of Walmart. But he doesn't see himself as that always. And so he's kind of, when we start talking about things like their wage structure or their growth, long-term growth strategy, as he told us, that's above my pay grade. In other words, those are questions that, even though he's a senior executive, he's not a top executive, you do not answer in public. You simply don't do. That's not a ticket to future success in a corporation. Those are questions that the president and the chairman answers. So it was good to get them on the table, but actually we shouldn't have expected answers to those questions, and we probably should have focused on the stuff that was much more under his purview. And that was a good lesson to me as a journalist. But that said, with all the kind of limitations on it, I don't think we wasted your time. As a journalist, I interview corporate people all the time, and 99% of what you hear is like generic talking points, standard issue stuff. But what you're looking for are little nuggets. And there were some interesting little nuggets that I just want to underscore for you in case you missed them, and you may not. But one is that everyday low prices is something they're not going to mess with. That is very much what they're about. And if there's any tension between sustainability and price, as we know that there is, as they know that there is, sustainability will probably suffer. They're willing to look for sustainability when it comes to cutting waste. Whether they're really willing to use Jib's language, internalize the costs of production, take things like the cost of carbon or the cost to the environment of pollination services, it doesn't sound like they're really willing to fold those into their prices. Another point that they acknowledged about that I thought was very interesting was that it's very hard for an individual company to internalize those costs if the government is not standing behind it. And they said on a couple occasions that they really need the government's help to move on some of these issues. So whenever you hear corporations saying, we'll do it on our own, keep in mind, often when push comes to shove, it's very hard to do it on your own because it puts you at a competitive disadvantage. And that's very much on their minds. I also think that, looking back and going over some of my research, that their commitment to sustainability may be waning a little bit. There was a very curious quote from Jack's boss, a guy named the CEO, Bill Simon. He was quoted in the Wall Street Journal recently to the effect that the company's sustainability efforts had distracted from its pricing mission. I thought that was interesting. And here's another quote. Sustainability and some of these other initiatives can be distracting if they don't add to everyday low prices. So the company bears watching to see what they really do going forward and whether they follow through on these agreements or will they run up against tensions, contradictions that are hard to resolve. They were telling us that there really isn't a contradiction between being more efficient, having low prices, internalizing all these environmental problems. I think that there are tensions, and I think they're dealing with those tensions, but they're not quite willing to acknowledge them, at least in a public forum. But it'll be interesting to watch going forward. Now, there was one other little good bit of news, which he didn't close the door to the question I asked about, would you consider signing on to the agreement, the Fair Food Agreement with the Immokalee workers? Now, I'm not going to go into much background about that, but he said it's something we're looking at. And afterwards, he actually said that he would meet with them, the activists from that coalition. That would be fantastic if they get that meeting, and it would be even more fantastic if Walmart signed on. It's basically an agreement where buyers of tomatoes would agree to price increase for the people who pick the tomatoes. It's not significant. It's a penny a pound. And we'll learn about that on the class on the 25th when two of the organizers will be here with Eric Schlosser. So if that came out of the whole session, that would be great. We'll see. It's an important initiative. And so I wish you all could have been at dinner. It was a different kind of conversation, but I think that tells you how hard it is to do this kind of work in public with big public corporations. So to leave it there, but I felt your frustration in the room and the strange energy coursing around. But I appreciate your civility in the course of that, because that's very important too. And it could have played out differently. So thank you for that. So tonight we have one of the heroes, certainly my hero, one of my heroes in the food movement, and that's Ann Cooper. Ann she has picked her battle in the food movement. It's school lunch, and she has scored some notable victories, both here in Berkeley and in her current job in Boulder, Colorado. Unlike many of the people we've been hearing from and reading, Ann spends most of her time on the ground, in the trenches, and knows better than anyone else the distance between theories, ideals, even policies, and their practical implementation in real schools, with real food, with real kids. So it's a really valuable perspective we're about to get. Ann is easily the most famous lunchroom lady in all of America, and surely the most effective. She revolutionized the school lunch program in the Berkeley schools and now serves as Director of Nutrition Services for Boulder Valley School District. She's also the founder of the Lunchbox Project, which she'll tell us about, and the author of 4 books, including, and I strongly recommend this one if this is an issue you want to delve into deeper, Lunch Lessons, Changing the Way We Feed Our Children. Please welcome Ann Cooper.
Okay, am I on? Yeah? Well, Michael, thank you, and I'm so excited to be here and so happy to be here, and it's so nice to see so many people here wanting to learn about school food, because that's what I do. And I spend all of my days literally feeding kids food. I started here in Berkeley, and now I'm in Boulder. And these are some of my kids at the Boulder Valley School District. When I got here to Berkeley, and then when I got to Boulder, in both places I said, I want to put salad bars in schools. And in both places they said, you can't. And I said, why not? And they said, because little kids can't deal with them, and big kids will spit in them, and you just can't do it. So what I want to say is you really can. I mean, you really can change almost anything you want to change. And it means that all of us really have to decide what it is we care about, what it is we want to change, what part of the world we want to make an impact on, and know that you can do it. So one of the things about school food is it's hard. This is not easy. It's not easy to change. It's not easy to deal with. But we have to start making changes. You know, hungry kids can't think. Malnourished kids can't learn. And what your takeaway here today, I hope, is, because I just don't want to be one more talking head that talks at you. The takeaway is you have to do one thing. Now, throughout my talk, I hope you just come up with one thing you all want to do to make things different for kids. So when I started doing this work, I decided that what we really needed was a food model that was regional, organic, seasonal, sustainable. And I started with regional, food that comes with a face and comes with a place. These are some of my kids in Boulder with some of the farmers. I mean, we need to know where our food comes from. And it's so important, and our kids need to know. I mean, we now have a generation of children that don't know the carrots grow in the ground, never mind who grows it for them. You know, so after that, after we talk regional, we talk organic. And there's lots of reasons, and I know I'm speaking to the choir, why organic is really important. But I'm here to tell you that it's super hard in schools. It just doesn't happen. And part of the reason it doesn't happen is because it costs so much money. I mean, schools just don't have the money to make these changes and do it with organic food. But we have to stop feeding our kids chemicals. I mean, we have to stop doing it. What are we thinking that we feed kids chemicals all day long in school and at home and everywhere? So one of the things that I think a lot about is antibiotics in food. I mean, it's crazy the amount of antibiotics. 29 million pounds of antibiotics every year is used in our country. 80% of it is consumed in animal husbandry. That means that all of us and all of you are consuming much of our antibiotics through the food we eat. That's crazy. Yeah, you know, it's probably over-prescribed and stuff like that, but when you think about it, 29 million pounds. And then there's GMOs, genetically modified organisms, genetically engineered foods. I'm sure you've heard a lot about that. When I came in, I saw the No GMO project. Why do you have to care? No mandatory testing, no mandatory labeling. You've all eaten it today. We are the only industrialized nation in the world that doesn't seem to care about it. We're guinea pigs. We have no idea what's going to happen to our children's children. You guys need to learn about this. This is your lives. This is your bodies. Pesticides and herbicides. Okay, this is one of the facts I hope you take away. U.S. agriculture uses 1.2 billion pounds of pesticides every year. Billion pounds. That means there's five pounds. Like if I had a 5-pound bag of sugar and opened it right here, that's how much every single one of us and our kids consume every year in this country. Now, who of you would take pesticides and feed it to a loved one? Okay, please stand up or hit your clicker. Now, all of this is allowed by the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture. And I want you to take away here, you don't have to believe a thing I say. I don't care if you believe anything I say, but learn about these things. DDT is good for you and me. Time magazine. You know, we cannot trust that our government or big business or big industry really cares about us, really has our best at heart, or our kids. So we have to learn about this. So what am I talking about? What is sustainable food? Triple bottom line: people, planet, prosperity, healthy food, healthy kids, healthy planet. You know, I'm sometimes called the Renegade Lunch Lady, and if it's renegade to think that kids should want to eat broccoli, the kids should know what a farmer's market is, the kids should know what real food is, well then renegade it be. But what we really need to think about is why we don't have this. I mean, why do we have a food system, a food supply, that doesn't have anything to do with sustainability? You know, just a few hundred years ago, we were all farmers. 95% of us were farmers, and now less than 2% of us are farmers. We have more prisoners in this country than farmers. 2.3 million prisoners, 1.9 million farmers. It costs $35,000 a year to keep a prisoner in prison. We're spending $7,500 a year to educate a K-12 student. Maybe we should change that. But we really have to change this paradigm. So what are the issues here? Certainly corporate profit, agribusiness, commodities, lobbyists. You know, our food system is not our own. Everybody else, seemingly, besides us, gets to decide what we eat. And that's just not acceptable. And what's happening is food is making us sick. Food is making our kids sick. I mean, it's just a crazy, crazy paradigm. And, you know, you heard from Walmart last week, but there's all kinds of big companies out there. So we have Monsanto and DuPont. They brought us Agent Orange and stain-resistant carpet. They control 90% of the commercial seeds in this country and the majority of all the food in grocery stores. What's that? You know, stain-resistant carpet. You know, why are these companies that are really chemical companies, agrochemical companies, deciding what we eat? Well, they are because of what our food system has become. It's so big, it's so overblown, that we have no control on it. And what happens is we have bad food in the food supply. Whether it is tainted meats going to schools, in Georgia they're just recalling meat. How about the 500 million eggs that were recalled last year? Downer cows in the food supply, tainted peanut butter. I mean, a month doesn't go by without us hearing about one more food-related illness. How long do we let it go on? And I say, how long do we? Because unless we, all of you, all of us care enough to say something, it's going to go on and on and on. Now, what should we be eating? Well, this is my plate. The one that's coming now is My Healthy Kids Meal Wheel. You know, we try and tell kids to eat fruits, vegetables, whole grains. Harvard just came out with their own. I mean, everybody says it, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, whole grains, and what's the most served meal in school food? I mean, this is what we're feeding our kids. It's a plate of corn. It's an entire plate of corn. And what's happening? Our kids are getting sick. The CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, has said of the children born in the year 2000, 1 out of every 3 Caucasians and 1 out of every 2 African Americans and Hispanics will have diabetes in their lifetime. I hope that takes your breath away. In their lifetime, many before they graduate high school. We are feeding our kids to sickness. We are feeding our kids to early death. The CDC has gone further to say, of those same children born in the year 2000, those are 11 and 12-year-olds. They're going to die at a younger age than their parents because of what we feed them. And make no bones about it. We as adults, as caregivers, as parents, as aunts and uncles and nieces, we decide, because if the 12-year-old is deciding that entire nation should be in therapy or more therapy. I mean, we have to take this seriously. We make all kinds of decisions for children, and we have to think about this, because if we're not making the decisions, big business is. Big business is spending $17 to $20 billion a year marketing non-nutrient foods to kids. We have now grown a generation of children that think chicken nuggets is a food group, that hot Cheetos is breakfast, that Capri Suns are really juice. I mean, kids don't even know what food is. When you say orange or grape, they think bubble gum, they think flavors. You know, it's crazy. It's crazy. And then, how about how much we eat? Eat, 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 says all the advertisements. And even in this country with so much poverty, Marion Nestle says we're producing 4,300 calories a day for every single person. Now, you know, I run, I ride, I get a lot of exercise, and I try and eat less than 2,000. So where do all the rest of those calories go besides on my hips? You know, I mean, what are we going to do if we're trying to convince people to eat more and more and more? Well, and how about that more and more? So this little plate of 8 fries, now I don't know when the last time one of you only ate 8 fries is what the USDA says a portion size is. And the one that's bigger than my head, and I have a pretty big head, but the one that's bigger than my head, that is what we're talking about serving people. And the reason you can serve the big one at the same price as the little one, why in fast foods it's bigger, 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 why there's all you can eat buffets, it's because how we can modify the food system. You know, this is a social justice, social equity issue. In the last few decades, we have seen the life expectancy and achievement gaps grow at about 10% a decade. So that means in our country, if you are rich, you will live longer and be better educated. And you know what? I want to challenge you, is that the country you want to live in? Do we want to be a nation of only rich people can survive? That's crazy. None of us want to go there. But school food, 5 big challenges: food, finance, facility, human resources, and marketing. Food, where do we get it and make sure it's good? Finances, how do we pay for it? We'll talk more about that. Facilities, when I came here to Berkeley, we didn't have a stove or an oven or a walk-in. Human resources, how do you teach people how to cook that have been serving chicken nuggets for 20 or 30 years? And finally, how do we get the kids to eat it? Now, you know, we know we're home of foodies and Alice Waters, but this is actually the food that I got to see my first day in Berkeley. This is what we were feeding kids. Extremo burritos, pizza pockets, corn dogs, all approved by the USDA. In fact, the USDA would pay me to feed kids this food every single day. This is what we're feeding our children. You know what? It's not okay. We have to make a change. And then if that's not bad enough, there's what the food is we're selling our kids. And in case you can't see, these are like corn nuts and cupcakes and Danish. And yeah, I mean, what is that? And why are we selling it to our kids? Because we don't fund school lunch well enough. So we think that what we're going to do is sell them crap, who cares if they get sick, and use that money for everything from, you know, footballs to erasers. I mean, this is nuts. What are we thinking? And then there's chicken nuggets. Now, who decided, and please click if you know, but who decided that chicken should be a heart, a star, a giraffe, or a Tyrannosaurus Rex? I mean, like, what happened to chicken being chicken? I have kids in the Boulder Valley School District whose parents come and say to me, well, you can't serve the kids chicken with bones. Kids don't know that chicken comes with bones. What, do we think God made chicken breast, for goodness sake? I mean, so we need to make changes. We just need to teach kids what real food is. We can do it too, all of us. I mean, again, I go back to that just one thing. We need to figure out a way how to come together as a community to really care about what we're feeding our kids and really make some positive change in schools. And again, we'll talk more about this, but it is hard work. This is not easy. It's so difficult. I actually can't believe I've been doing it for over 10 years and it's still so hard. So what is it I want, that renegade lunch lady in me? Fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, whole grains, healthy protein, call me crazy. I mean, that's what I want to serve kids instead of chicken nuggets, tater tots, extremo burritos, corn dogs, and the like. So why is it hard? I mean, it's so hard. How do we get food like that? How do we get real food? How do we have real kitchens? I mean, it's fine to say, we want to cook carrots, but what if you don't have a stove? What if you don't have pans? What if you don't have how do we get equipment into schools? And how do we train it? I have 200 employees that for decades have been serving chicken nuggets and tater tots. How do I get them to actually put a knife in their hand and cut something and then get the union to allow them to do it without a $42 raise? We have to think about these things. So what does it look like on a plate? Well, on the top left, it's those chicken nuggets and chocolate milk and canned fruit cocktail and frozen peas and corn and potatoes, which by the USDA standards is a vegetable. All of that, the USDA loves that. Never touched by human hands. I'm a chef, I want to touch things with my hands. I mean, come on, this is crazy. What do you mean food should never be touched with human hands? So what do I think? How about salad and fruit and white milk? I mean, that's what I want. This amount of vegetables was one day in Berkeley. And so first of all, when we talk about how hard this is, where are we going to get it all? And then you need cooks that can cut it, and you need knives, and you need cutting boards, and you need walk-ins, and you need the carts and the plastic containers. I mean, all of this is hard. I mean, there's wonderful things starting to happen, from Farm to School, and it's National Farm to School Month, to Food Corps that recently got 50 people across the country to help with gardens. So there's all kinds of wonderful things happening. But it's still hard. And then, how do you get the kids to eat it? This is not easy. That's $17 to $20 billion a year. Kids thinking that chicken nuggets is a food group. So we have classes for kids. We have kids seeing food as explorers. We have gardens. We have cooking lessons. We have Iron Chef competitions. We have all kinds of things to try and engage kids. Because if you do everything else right and they don't eat it, it's at best compost. Gardens. Well, here we are in Alice Waters' world. I had my start here in Berkeley. Gardens at every single school. Super important. We need to teach our kids where food comes from. The most asked question I hear from parents is, how do I get my kids to eat it? Well, one of the ways we're going to get kids to eat real food is for them to know what it is, to have ownership, to grow the food, to cook the food. So it's super important. And these are actually kids in the garden here. We have chef demos. Chefs that are friends of mine come in and help us teach the kids. And why is this so important? 1 out of every 4 meals in America is eaten in fast food. 1 out of every 4 meals is eaten in a car. In a car. And 1 out of every 4 meals is eaten in front of a blue screen. iPhone, iPad, I mean, when do we sit and talk to each other? I mean, how about sitting at a table and talking to somebody without your iPhone in your hand? Amazing, right? So one of the other things we do when we really talk about teaching kids is marketing, and we need to market to the parents. So this is a calendar we produce, and this year's calendar had student artwork. And we write the calendar for the entire year, so parents and their kids know what we're going to be serving. We don't pretend that, that we need to make it up every day. We do it for an entire year. And we work with high school kids. This is a group of high school kids I worked with in New York. Educated and aware teens who inspire smart eating, eat wise. And these were kids from Harlem. These kids had nothing. And, everyone in their family was overweight and crack addicts and the whole thing. But we really started teaching them about food, and these kids got it. And now there are peer-to-peer teaching groups all over the 5 boroughs in New York. these groups of eat-wise kids, trying to teach each other what good food is. For little kids, I use my meal wheel, and this is downloadable from my website, the Lunchbox, in English and Spanish. And if you look at this depiction and you see the burger that's so small, and you see, you know, all of the fruits and vegetables and grains that are so big, it's how we start teaching kids. And if you notice, I have a calcium group as opposed to the USDA that has to deal with the dairy lobby, has a milk group. We don't need a milk group. We don't need to drink more milk. We need to close the loop. We've got all these gardens. We need to have composting. This is actually here in Berkeley. I mean, actually teaching the kids where the scraps go, that we have an entire system. I mean, when we think about how complex and how many things we can teach around school food, whether it is compost and worms, or whether it is where your food comes from, or the carrots grow in the ground. I mean, this is part of the education. This is edible education. Breakfast, most important meal of the day. A lot of people are doing it. It should be universal. It should be real food. We've worked with a company called Full Bloom on products here in Berkeley and in Boulder. I mean, the idea that kids are coming to school drinking Capri Sun and having a bag of Cheetos or tater tots or whoever knows what they're having for breakfast. I mean, kids need to eat. If we want to close the achievement gap and if we want to close the life expectancy gap, we have to teach kids what real food is. We have to train people. You know, training's super important. When I started here and in Boulder trying to get people to put a knife in their hand and cut a vegetable, you would think I was like crazy. I mean, they tried to run me out of both school districts because I said, no, we're going to cut something. And the unions are all up in arms, and they said, how can we do that? And it's like, come on, this is just food. It's not brain surgery, it's broccoli. I mean, you know, if we want kids to eat, we have to give them the time to eat. Most schools are running 15 to 20-minute lunch periods, K-12, bell to bell. And if you're a third or fourth grader and you're going from one side of a school with 600 kids to the other side, and the bell rings here, and then it's 5 minutes before you can get there, and it's 5 minutes in the lunch line, and then you have 7 or 8 minutes to eat, I mean, how can we expect the kids to eat? So let's talk about money. Because I give these talks all over the place. And anyone who has anything to do with school food wants to say, we can't do it because. So the because is always money. So we're going to do School Food 101. Our tax dollars, and I want to be clear here, it is our tax dollars. So every single one of us is paying for school food. So we own it and should be responsible. So on the most macro level, school food means that $9.5 billion a year is feeding about 31.5 million kids a day, or 5.4 billion lunches a year, okay? I look at that number, that 9.5, and I go, it needs to double. And of course, everyone says, oh my God, we're in a recession, you know, there's no money, the economy's bad. What do you mean it needs to double? So let's talk about the macro level still. We have said, in fact, Michael Pollan has said, that we're spending $260 billion a year on just 2 diseases, diabetes and obesity. Okay, $260 billion. That's $5 billion a week, okay? Those wars that we're not in, everyone tells us, yeah, the wars are almost over, we're not really in them. $3 billion a week. So if we took off 1 week on the wars and 1 week on disease, we could double what we spend on school lunch. So it's not that we don't have the money, that everybody says we can't. It is about not caring enough. But I want to bring this home to us, okay, to every single person in this room. Now, there's probably no place other than Berkeley or Boulder that has more coffee shops, maybe Seattle, per capita than anywhere in the world, right? I mean, you can't walk down a street without seeing all kinds of coffee shops, whether they're Pete's or Starbucks or whatever. And you go in and you have a latte, and it's $4 or $5, right? And probably every single person in this room has had a beer or a glass of wine this week. And you go to a local beer bar, and beers are $4, $5, $6. And wine, now it's $7, $8, $10, $15. Well, that $9.5 billion comes down to $2.77 on the plate. That's what I have. That's what the government gives me to feed a child. And maybe $2.77 is not so bad. But after you pay everything else, you have less than $1. In Boulder, I spend $1.15. Most school districts are spending 85 to 95 cents per day to feed a kid. So that $5 cup of coffee, $5 beer, $10 wine, $15 wine is 5, 10, 15 times more than we're spending on our kids' lunches. Chocolate milk, soda and drag, gotta love it, right? You can ask me more about that. But that's why it's so important that we care about these things. Because we can really change it. I mean, when we live in a country where it just is acceptable that every day we're spending more on a soda than we do on our kids' lunches, never mind on all the other things. It means we can change. I mean, who even understands how much money our government spends? I mean, what is, millions of trillions of dollars? Who even knows? But what we do know is how we spend our own money. And if we really care about kids, if we really care about what they eat, then we need to think about this. And we need to get our elected officials to think about this as well. The idea that we can't get more money into school food, the idea that we spend 4 or 5 times more to keep a prisoner in prison than we spend on education, that we spend so much more on our beverages as adults than we spend on feeding our children, is unconscionable. And what I challenge all of you to do is one thing. Think about what that one thing is. What could you all do? I hope that you find some things. Find some things that you care about. Find something that you're passionate about. Find that one thing that you can do that will help feed kids better food. Well, I have to say it's not all doom and gloom. I have to say I'm becoming much more optimistic about these things. I'm becoming much more optimistic about really thinking about what we're feeding our kids and how we feed our kids. And part of the reason that I'm becoming more optimistic is we finally have a White House that cares about these issues. We have a president who actually talked about school lunch and food and agriculture in one sentence. As opposed to Reagan, he made ketchup a vegetable. So he was the last president that talked about it. We have a first lady who really thinks about these issues. We have a first lady who's a huge cheerleader on these issues. But even though the president and the first lady care, they've given us no money. Great cheerleaders, no real hard policy, no real money at this point. And as we start on the next farm bill, we should be thinking about these issues. We should be thinking about how we want to spend money differently. Well, I've done a couple of just one things, and one of the just one things I did in conjunction with the First Lady was let's move salad bars to schools. We decided that we were going to put 6,000 salad bars in schools across the country in 36 months. And as of this month, we will have put our 1,000th salad bar in schools. And I'm really excited about that. But we need to, in total, raise $15 million. So if anybody knows how to raise some more money, that would be really great. And if you know schools that need salad bars, they just have to go to the website, saladbarstoschools.org. But putting the salad bars there is not enough. So we really work with the kids on a program that we developed called Eat the Rainbow. And so we go into schools and give every single kid in the school a free salad so they can see what it's like and so they can taste it. We want kids to eat the rainbow. We want kids to eat colors. We want kids to know that grape isn't a flavoring ingredient. Well, one of the other things we did was develop this website, thelunchbox.org. And in this website, we decided we needed to put all the tools together, give them away free, in perpetuity, that school districts would need to change from processed foods to real food. So we have explodable recipes, we have menus, we have videos, we have all the tools, and we keep building them and putting them up there. Because we want to take away the barriers. So we want all of you to be able to go out there to a school and say, yes, you can. Yes, you can. And here are some of the tools to help you do it. Well, in closing, I guess what I want to say is, you got to do one thing. I know how busy your lives are. I have a really busy one too. But you know what? If nothing else, it should be a birthright in this country that every child, every day, had healthy, delicious food. Thank you very much. My pleasure. I have my mic. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That was great. That was galvanizing. I'm going to ask a question or two before I open it up to you guys. I want to pick up on what you were saying about what's coming out of this administration. And as you said, I mean, there's been a lot of great cheerleading, but we also had a piece of legislation last year, the Child Nutrition Reauthorization Bill. And many people in the food movement were fighting hard for this. And I'm curious to know what did it accomplish, if anything, and have there been any unintended consequences? Maybe just tell people what it is.
So the National School Lunch Act, this was called the Healthy Kids Act, this past go-round. Every 5 years, kind of like the Farm Bill, it's reauthorized. And a lot of people were fighting really hard to put better guidelines, and they were using the Institute of Medicine guidelines as the bar, and to also get more money. Well, last December, so it's already been 10 months, last December is when the bill passed. So far, nothing has happened. Not surprising for the government. There's been a lot of talk. They took 150,000 comments, and now they're thinking about it. Great. I don't know how long they need to think, because I want to say, if it was your kid that was sick, would it take 10 months to think about whether you ought to feed kids better food? I don't think so. But so far, nothing's happened except a lot of talking. I believe we will hear something soon, but I don't know what. So no unintended consequences so far. They did promise us 6 cents, which, in case you're wondering, is about how much I pay for a quarter an apple. It cost me 25 cents to put an apple on the plate. So the government's now going to give me enough for 1 1/4 more apples a week per kid. Hello?
That's what the increase amounts to.
Right, just a little more than a nickel. So it's just kind of crazy. But you need to learn about these things. You know, it comes up once every 5 years. It's somewhat tied to the Farm Bill. We're going to have another whole Farm Bill discussion. So again, just be aware when you hear about these things. And I'm hopeful that we will adopt something around the Institute of Medicine guidelines. But there's so much money coming out of the lobbyists that oppose these things. I don't know if you guys are following this at all, but right now there's a lot of hoopla around potatoes because the Institute of Medicine guidelines say that you should only serve them once a week because most schools were serving French fries as the vegetable. So chicken nuggets, whole wheat chicken nuggets now, so chicken nuggets and French fries, chocolate milk, and canned fruit cocktail is totally a reimbursable meal, just like that, because the breading on the chicken nuggets is the bread. I mean, hello. You know, so now the whole potato lobby, and there's a bill going to Congress this week to throw out the entire Healthy Kids Act until they figure out a way not to cut the potatoes. So lobbies are hugely important in this fight.
But how do school districts deal with the fact that you're going to raise the nutritional standards going to this National Institute of Medicine standards, yet you're only going to get 6 cents more?
Well, it's really a problem. I mean, I really believe we need somewhere between 50 cents and $1 more for school lunch. That being said, like any other big business, many school districts waste phenomenal amounts of money. So we can make positive change with the money we have. We can't go as far as I'd like to go, but we can make positive change. And in many districts, as you raise the participation, you bring in more money that can go to food. So school districts run very high labor costs, like 60, 65% against revenues, and like a restaurant would run 30. So if you can increase the number of kids eating, money coming in without incrementally increasing the payroll costs, then you can bring more money to the bottom line for food costs, and that's how it gets done.
So how do you do that, though? How do you make the school lunch cool?
Well,
there's a stigma attached to it in many places, right?
Absolutely. So to make school food cool food, I think it starts at home. I think it starts with getting kids to learn where food comes from, to grow food, to shop for food, to cook food, because once they do it, it's a cool thing. But besides that, I think we need a national campaign. I mean, nationally we have, don't do crack campaigns. We have don't smoke. We have, don't have unprotected sex. I mean, nationally we have all of these campaigns that cost millions and millions of dollars. And we need a campaign that makes real food cool food. And it's hard because of these lobbyists. But if we want to change it, I think that's what we need.
Mm-hmm. So how do you get kids off of nuggets? I mean, they come to school expecting and wanting nuggets.
Well, I'm happy to say that when I was here in Berkeley, there were no chicken nuggets or tater tots or French fries, and there are none in Boulder. And I speak about these issues all across the country, and I have to tell you that I've never had anyone tell me or write me that a child died for lack of a chicken nugget. It is just not happening. So what we do is we serve chicken on the bone, and we do tastings with the kids, and we have them help pick out sauces, and we serve really good chicken. And, over time they'll try it, and it's like anything else. It's a process. But you know what? There weren't chicken nuggets 50 years ago. This is a brand new invention. I mean, the whole idea of kids' food, the idea that kids get to have their own food. What is that? And we're the only culture that has done that, except the other cultures that are now mimicking ours. But when you go and travel to other places, they don't have kids' food. They have food. You eat it or you don't eat it,
Okay, let's hear from you guys. Who's got a question? I'm going to do one at a time. I don't know how to do the two question at a time. It involves, younger brain cells than I have. You in the turquoise. Yeah. Question is, and I got to repeat the questions because why did you move from Berkeley to Colorado?
So when I go to a school district, I'm not trying to marry it. I'm really trying to go in and help foment change and build an infrastructure, build a base, build a systemic, sustainable system. And Alice Waters asked me to come to Berkeley, and after I'd been here almost 5 years, it was just time for me to move on. It was time for me to pass the reins. And when I was ready to do that, I actually got asked to go to Boulder. And so because I was asked, I went and checked it out and thought this could be the next city I went to. So.
Are you still in touch with the people in Berkeley? And
Yes, in fact, I spent a little time with one of them today, and they say the program's going really great. And as you can expect, when sort of a founder births a program, it changes after they leave, which is all good. New energy comes in, new thoughts. But they said it was going really great, and they gave me some ideas of things I should be doing now too. So it's good.
Great. I had lunch there actually the other day, and it was really good. Teresa.
I'm really ADD.
The question is,
sorry.
Okay, of the 5 factors that you mentioned, financing, food, marketing, and I forget the other 2, where do you go first to drive change?
Yeah, so I'm really ADD, so of course I do it all at once. But and in every place I go, we literally do it all at once. You got to just do it. However, that being said, what I tell school districts that we consult for is to do a feasibility study or a self-assessment and figure out where your strengths and weaknesses are. And if you have limited resources, really look at what change you can impact the easiest and quickest, and just start down the list.
Yes? Okay, the question is, I want to hear more about soda and drag and what the Healthy Kids Act says about it.
I am not the poster child or much loved by the National Dairy Council. But the Institute of Medicine has said we clearly have an obesity crisis in this country. I spoke at a TED Talk the other day, and the figure that they quoted was 45% of all Americans are now overweight or obese. 45%. It should be appalling to us. And so there's clearly an obesity crisis. The National Dairy Council would have you believe there's a calcium crisis. There is not. The only age demographic in the nation that has a calcium deficiency is 13 to 17-year-old girls, and it's slight. So I don't believe we should be saying that kids need more milk. They don't need more milk, they need more calcium. And if we believe that the only way, and I believe this is untrue, to get kids to drink milk is fill it full of white sugar or high fructose corn syrup to get them to drink it, that's ridiculous. I mean, over 55% of all flavored milk is consumed in schools. That means parents aren't feeding it to their kids by and large. So this is crazy. I say it's soda and drag because most chocolate milk on a per ounce basis has more calories than Coca-Cola.
Yeah, right there in the green.
I'm wondering if there's been any connection in your programs or any studies that go along with it that are you tracking the levels of child obesity in the schools that you work in?
The question is, are you tracking the levels of childhood obesity in the schools you're working in? And do you see changes too?
So in Berkeley, the UC Center for Berkeley Weight and Health did a study that was funded by the Chez Panisse Foundation, and that study showed a couple of things, that our kids were eating 3 times more vegetables than kids who brought their food from home, and also were consuming less sugar at home because they weren't getting it at school, which was really, really fascinating. We did not have the money, nor do we in Boulder, to do those kind of longitudinal studies around weight loss or academic performance. There are some that have been done, and there are some states, especially states with really high obesity rates, Oklahoma, Georgia, Alabama, that are now doing BMI, body mass index, in schools for all their kids to try and track this stuff, but there hasn't been a study out yet. I think it'll take a while.
So, so just to underscore that, one of the readings you suggested we read, this Lisa Belkin piece from 2006 in the New York Times, I'm sure most of you read it. She was looking at this question, if we do succeed in changing school lunch, and there are places where we've come some distance, will we in fact help with obesity and diabetes? Do we have reason to believe that premise is accurate?
I do, and I will go back to it was a very small study happening here, but if we see in a small study that kids eating 3 times more vegetables, not even fruit, which is kind of easy to get kids to eat, but vegetables, that means they're consuming that instead of something else. So if we can get kids to eat more fruit, more vegetables, more whole grains, then they're going to be consuming less other things, probably bad, high caloric, high fat, high sugar, high salt things. So I do believe it. Anecdotally, I will tell you that we see all kinds of things that are better for kids when we get them off refined sugars and refined flours and things like that. So I believe it's true. No studies yet.
Okay, great. Yeah, in the back. So what are the purchasing, what's the purchasing process like, and what are the challenges to getting healthy food in schools?
Well, the bigger the district is, I think more challenging. Most school districts are really, really, really big bureaucracies run by people who don't know anything about food. New York City school food is the biggest school district in the country. They do about 900,000 meals a day. They buy more food than any other thing in this country except for the DOD, the Department of Defense. The department is run under the busing department. So that's, when you think that the people in charge at the highest levels of this purchasing often know nothing about food, it can be super challenging. Also, there are some USDA guidelines that say you have to purchase by low bid. There's ways around that, and I love breaking rules, so that's not too hard for me. But for a lot of people who are really worried about losing their job in this economy or whatever, they won't break a rule, and so they just go, oh, if you're only buying for the cheapest bid price and you're not doing triple bottom line bidding where you would say what's the price, what's the service, what's the quality, if you're only going to buy for the cheapest price, you're only going to have the worst food. So it really takes a change. It needs a level of expertise. It needs the patience of Job. And it needs tenacity to just change it one thing at a time. So
I want to drill down a little deeper on this. There's a couple different places you get food, right? I mean, as a school lunch director, there's commodities that come from the government. Will you explain how that works? And then the kinds of things that you would see at one of these fairs where all the food processors have their wares, and then how would you go about buying, say, from a local farmer?
So commodity foods, and this is where the Farm Bill comes in. Every school district that's part of the National School Lunch Program gets 19.5 cents per lunch for the amount of lunches you served last year. So if you served 1 million lunches last year, you'd get 1 million times 19.5 cents. And you get that to spend, and I say that in quotes, on commodity foods. And commodity foods is stuff that the government buys, usually in the form of price supports. As far as I'm concerned, it's a totally corrupt system, and we should just get rid of it. But for instance, you know, if Tyson, the chicken nugget kings, decide that there's too many chickens, which happened just not that long ago, they'll get the government to buy, you know, a few 100 million pounds of chicken, and then give it, quote unquote, give it to schools. Well, it might not even be bad if you got that chicken, but what's actually available to the school are chicken nuggets. And you don't get the chicken nuggets for free. They cost, oh, by the way, $42 a case to have processed. So there are ways to get sort of good food from the commodity food system here in Berkeley and also in Boulder. We buy what's called brown box. So we'll get raw chicken, or we'll get cheese, or we'll get raw burger, you know, whether it's burger we really want to feed our kids or not, but it's, you know, raw, at least it's not full of too much stuff. And so, but what most school districts do with their commodity product is send them out to have something else made, and that's where the chicken nuggets come, and the Extremo burritos, and the pizza pockets, and the corn dogs. Those all come through the commodity food program.
Mean the commodity products made by Tyson or whoever are sent to a processor?
Well, actually, it's so weird. I mean, if I can explain it succinctly. So it's a shell game. Tyson says, I have too much chicken to the USDA, and if I put it on the market, the price of chicken is going to go down, and chicken people are going to be hurt, you know, processors. So the government buys the chicken. Now, the chicken doesn't actually by law have to exist when the government buys it. It's virtual chicken, okay? It came from Farmville or something. So this virtual chicken is now bought by the government, and then government officials will tell all the school districts, you can have chicken, and it's free. It's surplus chicken. Great. We want that. Well, Tyson sold it to the government, but that chicken, that raw chicken that the government purchased, isn't actually available to the schools. What Tyson says is, oh, you can have all the free chicken you want, but you have to pay to process it into chicken nuggets, and you have to pay me the $42. So first of all, the government buys it from Tyson, and then Tyson gets $42 a case to make it into chicken nuggets the kids shouldn't eat anyhow. It's a crazy system. And the chicken may never have existed. Tyson can go and buy it on the open market to make it into those chicken nuggets to sell it to the districts at $42 a case.
That's amazing. That's an incredible racket.
You can't make this stuff up, right? I mean, you know, somebody ought to write a book.
Yes. The question is, does the government buy that surplus chicken at market value?
You know, I'm not exactly sure how they work it all out. I think it depends on the fluctuating market. So they may buy below the market in an effort to prop it up. So they're not going to pay what you would pay at a grocery store, but they're certainly not paying a penny a pound. So it depends on how much money these corporations need. So it's really about supplying these corporations with these price supports. It's like that plate of food I said, it's all corn. You know, I mean, so much of this is about the corn, is about how much money we spend on commodity dollars, about $45 billion a year, propping up corn, soy, cotton, wheat, and rice. And almost none of it goes into food we eat. It goes into coke, cattle, and gasoline at this point.
It's important to understand historically that when the school lunch program began, there was more of a alignment of interests between agriculture and our kids, in that we had undernourished kids, not overnourished kids. And when the program was started around World War II, right after World War II, it was driven by the fact that the Army and the armed forces couldn't find enough healthy, well-nourished children or teenagers to conscript. And so there was this wonderful alignment of interest. The government would buy surplus stuff from agribusiness and feed it to kids. But then we entered this new environment where we have kids that are getting too many calories and the wrong kinds of calories. So now the interests of the kids, it sounds like, and companies like Tyson are no longer aligned.
Well, that's right. I mean, originally the National School Lunch Program was started, as Michael said, for national security. We were too malnourished to fight. Interestingly, today we're too fat to fight. So, you know, and now these big corporations own so much. I mean, they have so much power and they have so much wealth that they really drive this need to consume these empty calories.
But this suggests a potential ally for you in the Department of Defense. Now, they usually get their agenda, and if their agenda actually becomes, and I think it is becoming that, a healthier teenage population, it seems to me that they should be enlisted in this fight.
Yeah, I'm not sure they would love me either, but maybe somebody else can help enlist them, so.
Okay, well, it's something to think about when you're thinking about, we talked a lot about, you know, where do you find powerful allies for a movement? I mean, grassroots are wonderful, but the way, given how fixed the game is in Washington, sometimes you need powerful allies to drive change, and there is one potential ally. Yes?
A lot of recent studies have shown an increased level of importance on caloric intake based off of the glycemic index and inflammation factor. You talked about the food groups and everything. Have you taken into account in organizing the menus the inflammation factor and glycemic index of the food?
So the question is, in formulating menus, there's been new research that suggests that inflammation is a big problem in obesity and diabetes, and that the glycemic index, which is a measure of how quickly glucose enters the blood, and some foods have very high ones, some have less high. Is this kind of research reflected in your menu planning?
You know, it's certainly something I know about and studied about and have written about, but I'll go back to that dollar I have. So there's 5 things the USDA says, 5 components to a school lunch: fruit, vegetable, grain that's supposed to be 51%, milk, which we don't need, and protein. We have to have those things on a plate. There's something called offer versus serve, where you can serve 3 of the 5, but then even so, it's in a certain proportion and certain size, and I have $1 or I have $1.15. So all kinds of things like organic food, like glycemic index. I mean, these are things that would be really great to tackle, but it's really hard. I mean, what do you want to give up? All our schools have salad bars. There's no high fructose corn syrup. There's no trans fats. We cook everything from scratch. We do some organic, you know, and I do think about the glycemic index, but until we can properly give school districts the resources to properly fund these programs, it's really hard to think about anything other than, can I serve that apple?
And am I right in thinking you've got minimum calorie counts you have to hit? And do you have maximum calorie counts?
Well, today, while the law hasn't changed, there's no maximum calorie count. So that plate of nachos with nachos with French fries and canned fruit cocktail and chocolate milk might be 2,000 calories, you know, feeding an elementary school kid. It's crazy. So the law up until now, for the last 65 years, which is how long we've had the National School Lunch Program, has had no maximum calorie counts and has minimums. And lunch is high. I mean, in Berkeley, when I was here, we got busted by the USDA for not serving enough calories, and I asked them if they didn't know there was an obesity crisis in this country because, and apparently they don't care because you gotta feed the kids a lot of calories so we can keep the big machine going. But the new IOM standards have actually capped maximum calories and taken away the minimum. So I think we're moving in the right direction, but again, the law has not been implemented at this point.
So you basically think the new standards are good?
I think that they're a lot better than anything we've had. I think they need to be even better, but it's an unfunded mandate. You're supposed to serve all these, different colors and fruits and vegetables, and you can only serve potatoes once a week, and all this stuff, and it's wonderful. But, how do you do it if you're a big school district on 85 cents? It's very, very challenging, which is why I think the School Nutrition Association, which is the group of all the directors across the country, they've come out against it. They're actually opposing the standards because they don't think that they can financially be met. So there's a lot of challenges in this.
So an unfunded mandate is basically the government tells you to do something and they don't give you the resources to do it. And that puts you in a real serious bind. Michael?
You said earlier that to make good food or school food cool, there needed to be a couple of things. And the second thing you said was there needed to be a campaign. Earlier in your slideshow, you showed the First Lady, you talked a little bit about what's going on. So do you not consider what the White House is doing a campaign around school food?
They're doing a campaign around school food in a very politically correct way. I don't think, we've had the First Lady say, let's take sugar out of schools. She can't. There's the sugar lobby. I think...
What do you mean she can't? What's keeping her from saying we should keep sugar out of meals?
She hasn't told me exactly she can't. But I think if we know anything about politics, we know that you have to tread carefully. And if for any reason why she can't at this point is her husband's trying to get reelected and is on really shaky ground. So you can't come out necessarily against people that have a lot of money. And these big corporations and these big lobbying groups have a lot of money. So I think it's very, very challenging. And she is trying to do it, but I think it's been limited. And I think if we look at the $17 to $20 billion a year that big business is spending to really elevate junk food to the cool status. I mean, kids know what every icon is. They don't know what vegetables are anymore. I think it has to be really massive. I think it has to be way more widespread. I think it has to be in multiple languages. And I think in many ways it may need to be grassroots.
What do you mean by that? How would you make a campaign like that grassroots? Local?
Yeah, I think it has to have a footing in local. It's wonderful to have Michelle, saying all these things, but until it becomes personal, it's hard to make change. When your kid is sick, I think it gets easier. When the kids in your school are sick, when they can't perform and they can't think because they haven't eaten, then it becomes personal. So if we can make this, if Michelle can be a cheerleader, if there can be money to help bring this down to a very personal level, that's when I think we'll see change happen.
Let's see, where haven't I gone? All the way back there, yeah.
So you worked in Berkeley and Boulder, which are both liberal, white, and relatively well off. Do you have any plans to move them to often more challenging neighborhoods?
So the question is, you worked in Berkeley and Boulder, which are relatively well-off and white. I'm not sure that's entirely true about Berkeley, but do you have plans to work in any more challenging environments?
Well, it's been so challenging so far that I've almost died a few times. You'd think that it's easy. It was not easy in Berkeley. And first of all, Berkeley school districts, whether, just as a point of reference, 45% of the kids are free and reduced. So this was not a white, rich community. We are a very diverse community in Berkeley, and there's a lot of very low-income families that are part of the process. And it was not easy. The kids went on strike. They wouldn't eat the food. There was food fights. I took away their Dayglow orange nachos. You'd think, it was crazy. I got death threats, so... Who knew that something, yeah. No, actually it was the chocolate milk. Taking away the chocolate milk got me death threats. And in Boulder, you'd think it was easy, and it's not. I'm in my third year, and I struggle. I struggle with parents who say, who are you to tell us what to feed our kids? Why do you get to decide? All I want my kid to do is eat. I don't care what they eat. Whatever it is.
So how do you answer that when a parent says that to you?
On my good days when I've had enough sleep, I just say that, this stuff is really important. The research is really showing us that these are issues. We now have an obesity and rate of, overweight and obesity at 45%. If things don't change, the CDC has said that by 2040, every single person in our country will be overweight or obese. You really have to have these discussions. Now, when you ask about me going to sort of a more difficult situation, maybe like, Chicago or New York or LA or something like that, we're really working, my resources at this point are going into building the lunchbox, putting these tools out there that every school district can use. You know, I can't be the lunch lady for America. I can't go to every school district. There's 15,000 of them. So what I'm really trying to do is use the expertise I've had and best practices from everybody I know all across the country and really put out there the tools so everyone can make these changes in their own communities.
Before I get to your questions, so we didn't talk about farm to school. Is this, I mean, given the amount of money you have, I sort of have trouble imagining how this works.
So Farm to School is a wonderful program. It's National Farm to School Month. I really believe in it. But there's a big but as far as I'm concerned. And the big but is most farm to school programs are trying to put that beautiful farmer, like flatland farms. I used to love those apples, and they were in Berkeley. They're putting the apple next to the chicken nuggets or the tater tots because you can't take on the center of the plate. And as important as farm to school is, it actually takes resources away, in many cases, from changing the center of the plate. So I kind of feel like we do farm to school in all of my schools because every single school has a salad bar and it's got all fresh ingredients on it, and we work with local farmers when we can, and we help local farmers get into a traditional distribution chain and model. But that being said, it's the center of the plate that's the problem, and that's a national problem that has to be solved, and farm to school for the most part works around the edges. And it's really important, so I don't want there to be a negative takeaway, but it's not fixing the overall problem.
Great, good answer. Yes?
You said it was important to encourage kids to eat at school, and I was wondering what you do if a kid has a food allergy like gluten or soy. Are they excluded from this type of project?
So the question is, when you have kids who've got gluten or soy allergies, do they end up being excluded from the school lunch?
You know, this allergy thing, we could have a whole long discussion about it, and if you really want to learn more about the allergy issue, I think you should look up Robin O'Brien and check out her website, allergykids.com. So first of all, allergies are a pretty new thing. And I personally believe that a lot of the reasons we see so many kids with allergies is GMOs. It's that our immune systems are so battered by all the pesticides and the GMOs and all the chemicals and stuff that now we have a whole generation of kids that have wheat intolerances, dairy intolerances, soy intolerances. And I will also go further to say, and this is not PC at all, that it's a demographic issue. I mean, in Boulder, and there's a lot of wealth there, you know, I don't have one free and reduced kid that's wheat intolerant, and I have 35% of my rich white kids that have some intolerance to something. That being said, we work at this really hard. We have an entire allergy section of our website for the school district. We list every ingredient and all the items. We have a big allergen list, and we say that, you know, what has wheat and soy and dairy and all of that. And we work really hard at trying to give the kids options, but I go back to my dollar, you know. If you want to get really gluten-free bread, you know, it costs 25, 30 cents a slice, and 2 pieces of bread is then, you know, 2/3 of all the money I have. So there's got to be balance, but we work really hard at it, and it's becoming more of an issue.
Yes, over there.
So this is already going on in Berkeley, but people here locally want to get involved. What are some things that we can do?
Question is, if people want to get involved in this issue, what can they do?
So there's a couple of different things. You know, from a personal level, I want to say that we all can do stuff with kids, whether it's eat with a kid, shop with a kid, take a kid to the farmer's market, cook with a kid, make food part of our lives and part of children's food, and make it important. The next time you need to eat with a kid, do not make it a drive-through, all right? Make it something you eat, even if it's as simple as making a salad. So that's something that every single person can do, because I'm assuming every person in this room knows a child. So nobody's like let off the hook there. I'm pretty sure in Berkeley, like in every other school district, certainly when I was here, we always needed volunteers to help. You can go to the district website, email the director, her name is Marnie Posey, and say, hey, listen, I have some time, I'd like to help. And then there's the national level. I mean, get involved, learn about the National School Lunch Program, learn about the Farm Bill. You know, be that person who writes Congress and says, you know what, maybe it needs to be more than 6 cents. You know what? Potatoes shouldn't be a vegetable in schools. That's ridiculous. It shouldn't be the #1 served vegetable in schools. It is, that's crazy. So, and that, we actually have senators that are trying to derail the entire national school lunch program because of this potato issue. So get involved, know the politics, be the person that stands up and speaks your mind.
Who's the senator who's trying to derail the potato rule?
It's a senator from Colorado and a senator from Maine. Fancy that, the places where our potatoes come from. Colorado, it's Udall, and I forget the senator from Maine. But they literally are trying to derail the whole thing because they're afraid we won't eat enough potatoes in America if kids don't get them at school 7 days a week.
Wow. All the way in the back, yes. As loud as you can.
Looking at countries that do have successful lunches at school, what are they doing right? And, compared to what we're doing, like, what are they doing different?
Good question. The question is, countries that are doing it right, I'm curious to know which they are, and what are they doing differently?
2 of them that I've visited extensively are France and Italy. And no surprise, they have very strong food cultures. In each case, lunches are around 90 minutes. And you might remember I said in America they're 15 to 20. In both cases, they spend about $5 to $6 on the school lunch. And in this country, we're spending $2.77. In both cases, they put a real strong importance on organic, country of origin, teaching the kids about food. Kids actually sit at a table and are served. In France, when I ate there with the kids, it was multi-courses. In Italy, it was multi-courses. They had a raw beet salad. It was just unbelievable, and these are young kids.
The question is, how is the wine?
It was great, but I didn't have it with the kids. But so it's really about, in America, we don't have that breadth of food culture. We have a very new food culture. It's very homogenized. We're really into technology. I mean, everything now needs to be eaten by hand. I mean, it took Americans to come up with TV dinners, for goodness sake, So those that are doing it different are giving the kids the time and resources. But those countries as well have 8-hour school days, 9-hour school days. In America, we're down to 6.5, and that makes a huge difference as well.
All the way in the back. What are your thoughts on Jamie Oliver, and have you been able to connect with him?
I think that he's done a really, really great job of bringing this issue to the dining room table. I think what he did was because it was reality TV, kids, especially in secondary school, might actually talk to their parents about food. And most parents have no idea what their kids eat in school, and so he brought it to the table. I give him a phenomenal amount of credit. I think he's done a world of good. Both of our foundations work. I have a foundation, he's got a foundation, they work together. And we try and help each other out. Like, our foundation does a lot of recipe development, his doesn't, so he has on his website to go to my website to get recipe stuff. So yeah, we're very collaborative.
Time for 1 or 2 more. Yes, you.
Just going back to how you said that Michelle Obama.
Careful there.
One of those MB kind of people, right?
She can't say anything about sugar because of the sugar lobby. But we tell our kids not to smoke and we tell our kids not to drink. And so the tobacco lobby and the alcohol lobby were overcome. So I'm curious what the difference is and why we can't tackle sugar or potatoes, but we can tackle tobacco.
Well,
The question is, let me repeat the question. The question is, we were able to overcome the power of the tobacco and alcohol lobbies so that we can have public health campaigns against their interests. Why have we not been able to do that in the case of food?
I think we may be able to start. I mean, there's interesting, I don't know if any of you remember, it must have been 7 or 8 years ago, that there was actually the beef lobby, or the National Cattlemen's Association, sued a high-profile person here in our country because they said you shouldn't eat burgers, or they were talking about bad burger. And they said that because this person said this, no one would eat burgers now. And there was a law that came out of that is the vegetable, I don't know, there's a law that actually says that you can't denigrate a vegetable. So there's these crazy laws on the books, but food is really personal. I mean, it's one thing to say that we're really sure that if you drink too much, you're going to become an alcoholic and it's going to hurt you. And we're really sure now, although it took decades and decades and decades to say that we shouldn't smoke. So it's just, I think there's so much money in it. There's so much dichotomy around it. I think it's exacerbated by the fact that we're in a recession. So I don't know. I hope we get there.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap up. I want to point out that you use the word crazy, I think, more than anybody who's been on this stage. And there is a lot that's insane about the system you're describing. But I just wondered if I could leave you with one question, which is what gives you hope right now?
You know, what gives me hope is when I see kids in the cafeterias eating. And in Berkeley and now in Boulder, I eat school lunch pretty much every day. And when I'm sitting in the cafeteria with the kids, and the kids are telling me how good it is, and how, you know, and that they really like it. And when I see participation rates going up, so we're up to, you know, in Boulder 2%, which is tiny, but it's up. And so it's all about the kids, because when you work with the kids and care about the kids and teach the kids, they get it. Parents and adults are most often the problem.
Great, Ann. Thank you so much for coming tonight, and thank you for your work.